Today, I had the distinct pleasure of speaking with a woman who has found a very beautiful way to embrace a tragedy that took place over 10 years ago. She lost her 17-year-old daughter. So, my guest today is Lisa Boehm. She is a speaker, an author, and a resilience strategist who helps people navigate life's biggest changes with clarity and courage. After experiencing a profound personal loss and years in frontline healthcare, she developed her reset framework, a practical approach to releasing what no longer serves us and rebuilding through small, meaningful shifts. Her upcoming book, called Now What? Finding the Courage to Rise After Everything Changes, will be out in spring of 2026. The book blends personal experience, a little neuroscience, and actionable strategies that help readers thrive through transition. Lisa's work reminds us that resilience isn't about bouncing back. It's about moving forward with purpose. Without further ado, I bring you Lisa Boehm.
But, as we go through life and we have these experiences, I think, again, our perspective changes. But what I'm picturing in my head right now, for example, is that picture we've all seen in some executive's office with the guy climbing up the side of a mountain and in great big capitals across the top of the poster, resilience. And, in smaller print underneath, the ability to bounce back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I look at that definition, and honestly, I've looked it up online, dictionaries, Wikipedia, all this stuff, and it's what's written everywhere, the ability to bounce back. And I just think BS. Because anybody that I know that's been through something really hard will never go back to being the same person again. And I think it almost sets us up for failure.
You're listening to Midlife Strategies for Badass Women, the no BS podcast for women over 40 who are sick of playing by someone else's rules. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, badass midlife strategist, truth teller, and professional fire starter for midlife reinvention. Around here, we don't do fluff. We do real talk, bold strategies, and badass breakthroughs. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's your damn power move. If you're all in, unapologetic, and ready to reinvent, let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Midlife Strategies for Badass Women. I have a delightful guest on today, and we've had a couple of conversations prior to her popping on the show here, and she has some really amazing messages for all of you today. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pieces that everyone can resonate with on some level. So I'm just going to bring on my guest today, Lisa Boehm. Lisa, welcome to the show today.
Hey, Sue. I've never been called a badass before, so I'm super excited to be in this category of badass
Welcome to
women.
the club.
Thank you.
We can go get tattoos after if you're up for it, okay?
I'm in.
Okay. I waited to, actually, that's kind of funny because I got my first tattoo, which I swore I would never in a million years ever get a tattoo. I'm like, that's just the stupidest thing ever. Did not get one until I was in my early 60s. So I just got another one before my birthday on September 7th. My birthday's not on the 17th, but I just got another one this year. So now I have two, and they're both around things that I feel close to. The first one was kind of my coaching tagline, which was awaken a life worth being. And the second one is just sort of a graphic image with the word equanimity. And both of these things I resonate with. So, all right, enough about me. We're here to talk about you today. Lisa, tell me a little bit about your background. And I know that you lost your daughter at 17. If you could, or if you would like to, could you speak to that a little bit? Because so much has come out of your experience of dealing with grief with the loss of Katie. So let's just use that as a starting point.
Absolutely. life was going along just as I had planned. I'm one of those type A planners who's got 50,000 steps laid out. And then I learned very quickly, in the drop of a hat, that life can change so dramatically. And our daughter, Katie, as you said, was killed in a car accident at the age of 17. And, someone who had worked in oncology with the terminally ill for 30 whatever years up till that point, I thought I knew a thing or two about grief.
Yeah.
Turns out I knew nothing, because grief is so much more than at least what I thought. I thought it was deep sadness, but it has this crazy ripple effect that just boils over into every last crevice of your life. It's really the epitome of change on every level. In terms of losing a person that you love, there's a hole in my family immediately. My identity changed immediately. People didn't see me as the mother of two new people I met. I had to explain the whole ugly story to them or choose to avoid it, which felt worse. The person I was professionally changed. So even though I continued to do my work in oncology, I pivoted. I became a grief coach. And that is something that I still continue to do. But as my grief has evolved and I have evolved as a human, I have changed again. It's forced me to pivot again. And now I focus on helping others through difficult times in their life. I help organizations cope with massive changes in the workplace. So it's really just been a journey, for lack of a better word. It sounds so cliche, grief is a journey. It really and truly is.
Yes, excuse me, and I love what you said about it's not just one thing. It touches every aspect of your life, and it really is about change. It's about sudden change, in your case especially, and I think it's interesting how you are now, like you said, working with corporations to help them go, through their changes, because not only does it affect every aspect of the corporation, it affects every individual within that corporation. So it really does have a ripple effect. Um, okay, that's amazing. I love that. So tell me about the book that came out of your grief, because you are a published author, and I know that you're working on another book. So let's talk about your first book, which is Journey to Healing: A Mother's Guide to Navigating Grief.
Well, oddly enough, there was a point early in my journey, and I honestly can't remember when it was because that first year was just such a blur. But my daughter was a competitive dancer. And I cannot tell you how many recitals and practices and dry runs, et cetera, I had sat through. Don't get me wrong, I loved every minute of it, but it was getting to the point where I would hear a song on the radio and I would start choreographing it. Like that's how immersed I was in the dance world. And there was this point after losing Katie that I kept having this recurring choreography in my head, for lack of a better word, just imagery of these very contemporary dancers, a small group of them separated on stage, but holding these big, ugly suitcases and taking these dramatic big steps towards each other. And I literally pulled out my laptop one day and I just kind of let it pour out of me. And this, I think, kind of incredible short story came out, which I called The Suitcase. And it was all a metaphor about grief. And, I shared it with some people and they're like, you got to publish this. And I kept thinking, no, like there's something bigger here. And then about 6 months later, I said to my husband, I want to write a book. And he said, about what? And I said, well, grief, our journey. And he's like, who wants to read that? And I said, well, I don't know, but I really feel compelled to do so. And we went back and forth and I said, I'm just going to do it. You don't have to be on board, but I'm going to do this. And now this is the part where everybody's going to think I'm a little bit crazy, but my daughter was the writer. I was never a writer. If you would have told me I was going to write a book one day, I would have laughed at you and said, no, I'll scale Mount Everest before I ever write a book. And yet I sat behind my laptop, and if I could just let myself kind of go, my hands just started typing, and I swear that was Katie coming through.
Mm,
I have had a psychic say that she is the co-author of that book, which is why I put the letter K in my pen name. But
nice.
I just felt, no, this goes back 10 years. We're almost at Katie's 10-year anniversary. So 10 years ago, the books weren't the same as they are now. I had a lot of trouble finding books that gave me hope. I found that most of the messages out there, whether it was in books or videos or online resources, were frankly doom and gloom. Your life is
Mm,
over. Your marriage is over. And probably your teenage son is going to have mental health and drug issues his entire life. The end. And I just thought, you know what? If I'm looking for hope and some kind of inspiration, maybe, then maybe there's other women who are in my shoes looking for that too. So that's kind of the approach I took to that book. And I really broke it down into just different steps people can take, because grief is just such a big, ugly beast. I wanted
mm.
people to know that there are little things that we can do for each other, or for ourselves, rather. It doesn't have to be this ginormous big step, but that the little steps will get us to the place we want to go. And I published that in 2019.
Excellent. So I don't think anybody out there is gonna think you're crazy because I do think that, there are so many more resources now for things like grief and, you know, especially for women, because when women reach a certain age, we start to well, you said when you lost your daughter, you felt like your identity had been ripped from you.
Hmm.
And I think there are so many things as women in middle age that we come to a certain point, we're like, "I'm no longer that person anymore. I no longer have that identity. Who am I?" Whether it's loss of a loved one or, loss of a job or whatever it is, there's that whole, like, "Who the heck am I now?" I also wanna talk about the suitcase thing that you mentioned, how you saw the choreography, because before we got online here, we were talking about another guest that I had on, um, week before last or something, Becky Livingston, who wrote a book called The Suitcase and the Jar, where she also had lost her 23-year-old daughter and decided to go on a long journey with her daughter and some of her ashes, and hence the suitcase and the jar. And she was gone for 26 months. And so it's interesting that you had that vision in your mind about the suitcase and all of the different things that are packed in each one of our suitcases.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. So, uh, let's jump ahead. You are currently working on a new book, and I'd love to know, you've gone through a lot in the past 10 years. What is this new book gonna be about? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but just with the changes that I've experienced as a grieving mom, the changes I've experienced as a woman, the changes I've experienced as a human, the growth, if you will, the discovery of all these coping mechanisms and school tools and strategies and all these kind of things that I've built into my little personal toolbox of coping. You know, when I was working with other coaches and so on, I've had a number of people kind of give me the nudge, and the universe has given me a nudge that I have a bigger message to share, and that everything that I have learned from loss is very applicable to a lot of the challenges that we face in life, whether it's divorce, whether it's job loss, whether it's loss of a person, loss of identity, this friggin' thing called menopause. There's so many things. And once I started kind of outlining this idea of a book, it went from I don't know to a hell yeah. And it's just really, it's called Now What? And it
Hmm.
really addresses all of those situations in life when we're kind of standing on the precipice of not knowing what the heck has happened, where to go, what to do, but to give people those same kind of tangible baby steps that feel manageable and easy to get through the things that life throws at us.
Exactly. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because I think a lot of people just see change, whatever it is, or loss or whatever, as just this big, huge thing.
And
And
bad.
yeah, big bad monster, like in Monsters Inc., Sully, the big hairy one. Uh and and it keeps people stuck. It keeps people like, "Oh my god, I can't take this on. I can't," and it keeps us in our comfort zone, which may be discomfort in some cases. And so I want to talk about what some of those tiny little steps are that you help that you've used in your life and that you're now bringing to other people, so that it's not just this. You talked about climbing Mount Everest, right? It's not Everest. It's like the foothills, to start off with, maybe a speed bump in your parking lot. So tell me a little bit about, your baby steps.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a new idea by any stretch of the imagination. There's tons of authors and speakers out there that talk on this, but it really is so true that when we can take Mount Everest and break it down into steps. When you think about, now I'm from Canada, so I think of Banff and all the mountains in
Mm.
Banff. But regardless of what mountain you resonate with, if you imagine yourself standing at the base and looking up and thinking, there's no freaking way. But then you literally put one foot in front of the other. Well, half an hour later, if you turn around and look behind yourself, you see how far you've come. But we forget the power of those baby steps, right? We think, or like, take weight loss, for example, right? We want to lose 20 pounds. Well, nobody celebrates the 1 pound loss. But when we do that week after week and we're consistent with our actions, guess what happens, right?
Yeah.
And I found that in grief, if we go back to that, rather than putting all this pressure on myself to be quote unquote better in a year, it was like, well, what's a one tiny thing I can do today? I call them 1% shifts.
Mm.
Well, if you're stuck in bed, you just can't get out of bed today, maybe get up, put some fresh jammies on, and get back in bed. There's your
There you go.
1%,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Um, Getting back to weight loss, maybe, instead of thinking I'm going to start running and I'm going to do, I'm going to run 5 miles every day. Well, I think everybody knows who's familiar with the running room. I think they're all over North America. The fellow who started the running room, he was an overweight smoker. And what he started doing was he would run outside at night because he didn't want anybody to see him because he was so out of shape. And he would run from one light post to the next light post. And then he'd walk to the next one. And then he'd run from the next light post to the next light post. Baby steps, right?
Yeah.
The thing that comes with baby steps is that builds confidence, right? I did that easy thing. It wasn't
Yeah.
so bad. And it makes it easier to be consistent. And we all know that consistency is the only way to get to whatever goal that we have in mind. And it's also really easy to layer on these little 1% shifts. So with grief, it might be getting out of bed, having a shower, maybe having a smoothie instead of, leaning into that glass of wine or something that's maybe not quite as healthy. But they're easy shifts.
Mhm.
So that's the biggest message I have, is we need to let go of this idea of perfectionism all the time. I struggle with it. I still struggle with it. But, keep it simple. And then I think it comes down to some other steps too, like letting go of the BS that we can't control.
Which is a lot.
99% of the barriers are the 5 inches between our ears,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
In terms of grief, I was somebody who got stuck in the muck a lot, thinking, what if? What if I hadn't let my daughter go out that night? What if she had gone out with a friend instead? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Well, what if thinking just keeps us stuck in the past? None of us can control what happened 5 minutes ago. So why do we stay stuck there?
Yeah.
You know, instead, and that's kind of how the title of my book came, is what now? What can
Now.
I do with
Right
this?
this minute.
Well,
Now.
not only
Well, that's the
now,
way I think of it too.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
like, what can I
for
do at this
sure.
particular moment?
But I mean, the whole point is that what now gives us power here and now, but
Mhm.
also in the future.
Mhm.
So if you don't have the answer, what do I do right now? You can kind of let that digest, ruminate, so that in the future you can still take action. So when I started thinking, well, what now? What can I do? At first after Katie died, it was like, well, nothing. What's done is done. And then it was like, no, wait just a minute. I can help other people. I can work with the city to make sure lighting gets put up along that section of road so that nobody else has to die in a car accident at that point. I can help other young girls who don't have the funding for graduation dresses. I can do so much to honor my daughter. And just, I think, switching our perspective and thinking about what we can do to be of service to others can really, really be powerful to get us through difficult times.
Yeah, that is huge. Absolutely, because we do get so, like you said, stuck in the muck, stuck in our own muck
Mhm.
of how miserable we feel. And however, there's always somebody out there that's having a much worse day than you are,
Yeah.
regardless of where you are. And I love that you were able to shift that thinking and think, how can, what, like in some ways, what would Katie want me to do? How can I honor her? How can I help other young women? And I think that that is beautiful. Uh, I'd like to talk a little bit about resilience because I'm curious about your thoughts about resilience because you did say something like people don't always get resilience right. They get it wrong all the time, and I'm curious about what do people get wrong? Because I consider myself very resilient, given what I've been through and all of that, and I have my own theories, but I'd like to hear yours as well about
Well, this is
resilience.
just my opinion.
Yes.
But, as we go through life and we have these experiences, I think, again, our perspective changes. But what I'm picturing in my head right now, for example, is that picture we've all seen in some executive's office with the guy climbing up the side of a mountain and in great big capitals across the top of the poster, resilience. And, in smaller print underneath, the ability to bounce back.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I look at that definition, and honestly, I've looked it up, online, dictionaries, Wikipedia, all this stuff, and it's what's written everywhere, the ability to
Mhm.
bounce back. And I just think BS, because anybody that I know that's been through something really hard will never go back to being the same person again. And I think it almost sets us up for failure. Because I, for one, thought, okay, I guess that's the goal here is to go back to who Lisa was before. Well, she doesn't exist anymore. How can she? You know? So then I kind of took that weight off my shoulders. I was like, okay. And I don't think there's any bouncing to be had. I think maybe there's moving forward. I think that's a better way to put it because when we move forward, we can do that with grace. We can do that at our own speed. There's no playbook, there's no must do's. And I just think it's also a choice. And I know that right there can really make people bristle, that resilience is a choice. But I think at the end of the day, it really does come down to that. Change is hard.
Mhm.
Healing is hard. Being, in these terrible circumstances that people find themselves in is hard. But I think it's a choice to stay there or it's a choice to do the work and set your compass to move forward.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm glad you said, what you said about bouncing back because it does make it, like, seem like, I'll just bounce right back and be the happy, wonderful person I was before or whatever it is, and it's like, no, that's not what it's about, and, it's about, like you said, making those 1% changes and figuring out it's like bouncing forward, but there's like you said, there's no bouncing. There's just doing that one step at a time. One little turtle step. I call them turtle steps.
Yeah.
One little turtle step. Stop, assess, give yourself some grace, celebrate. Take the next little turtle step.
Yes.
Stop, celebrate, give yourself some grace to continue on. Because you're right. You're not going to go back to being the same person. You're going to be a different person. And you are going to bring all of that experience, all of that grief and everything with you in some way that has changed you. And like you said, you can either get mired in it or you can do something different with all of that stuff. That doesn't mean that you have to pack it up, put it in a suitcase, and put it in a closet somewhere. You're going to experience this. And I think that that is really facing all of those things, getting quiet and letting those things come to the surface and then dealing with whatever those feelings are a little bit at a time is very, very challenging. And that's when we need support to help us move forward, take that 1% change so that we can, quote, air quotes, bounce back and be resilient. I think resiliency is a great thing. And I feel like I have been resilient in so many different times in my life and gone beyond and learned. I mean, I've learned from the experiences that I've had that may or may not have been favorable, usually not. But I've used those emotions and those experiences to, like I said, craft a new way of being that feels good and that feels authentic to me. And then that's going to change again. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
One other thing I want to quickly add about resilience is,
Mhm.
at least in my mind, I had this idea of growth, healing, whatever you want to call the magic word, as being this, straight upward line.
Mm.
When in fact, I think resilience looks more like a roller coaster with dipsy doodles and ups and downs and a lot of falling down, frankly, but a
Mhm.
lot of getting up, a lot of
Yeah.
skin knees, a lot of tears along the way. It's not just one day you decide, I'm going to become resilient. And away you go. It's falling down, it's getting up, it's all of those ugly things. But eventually there is a movement forward or an upward, incline kind of thing. But it's never neat and tidy.
Life is messy, very messy.
Very.
But you know what? That's what makes it fun. If it were easy and if it were like everything was, unicorns and puppies all the time, yeah, it would be boring, I think,
Well, and
as
none of
heck.
us would grow. None of
No.
us would experience these moments.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, badass listener, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Yeah, it's not that difficult. Seriously, I've created a limited series mini podcast, which is only 21 episodes. It's entitled Podcasting for Real Estate Pros. Now, if you're not a real estate pro, that's okay. You can still listen because it goes through all of the steps from creating a concept to building content pillars to recording to actually launching your own real podcast. Now, this can be a marketing tool if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a real estate professional, whether you're an agent, whether you're a inspector, whatever industry you're in, this can be useful. It also has a free downloadable workbook. So wherever you listen to your podcasts, like Midlife Strategies for Badass Women, whether on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are, check it out. It's called Podcasting for Real Estate Pros. Listen to a few episodes. They're super short. They're like anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes long. Tons of information, actionable steps. Hey, you never know. You could be the next Josephine Rogan. All right, get out there, listen to that podcast, get your workbook, and I'll see you behind the mic. You talk about joy being the missing piece that, is a big part of change. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's something, again, I realized in my own journey. I use a framework in my new book. I won't give it all away, but essentially, it came to me that we can work hard on our stuff, and we've got to let go of all that, doesn't serve us, and we have to envision where we want to go, and we have to self-care and blah, all this stuff. But I think the missing piece is joy and fun. I listened to a podcast by Mel Robbins, I'm going to say about a year and a half ago, and it caught me on the perfect day when I needed that message. And essentially, she said, as humans, as adults, we spend 50 weeks of the year planning and saving for a 2-week holiday that brings us quote unquote fun and joy. Right? And she said, what is it about those holidays that make them so much fun? It's the adventure. It's the newness. It's the being curious. She said, think about it. When you're on a holiday, you go somewhere new, usually. You wake up in the morning. Where are we going to get coffee? I don't know. Let's go for a walk and find a shop. You go to new places. You are a traveler. You are seeing something for the first time. And it's all of these kinds of experiences that make it a lot of fun.
Mhm.
And you don't have the worries of your day-to-day stuff. So she said, I challenge you to create more of this in your own life. And right around that time, we had to put our little 18-and-a-half-year-old dog down.
Yeah.
And, he was as much of a part of our family as my other two kids. And of course, it was horrible and sad, but at the same time, it kind of was just like a little bit of freedom because he was really not well in his last year, so we couldn't leave him alone. So I think the next weekend I said to my husband, let's go on an adventure. And he's like, my husband is a pharmacist, like very much spreadsheet thinker. Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? I said, we're going to have some fun. It's like, huh? Anyway, so
Oh.
I did like 10 minutes of research, and I said, we're going to point our car east, and we're going to hit every fun little town, every little museum, every coffee shop, every bakery, every unique little hike, river valley, et cetera, et cetera. It cost us a tank of gas and lunch at a cute little bistro, and we had the best day discovering all these new things and meeting new people. And I shot like a 1-minute video everywhere we went, and then I put them all together, and we laughed so hard. And we still talk about that day. And in fact, this summer we did the same thing, but we pointed our car in the opposite direction and went adventuring. And I just really think that that is so important, to be spontaneous. Quit worrying about what the outcome is going to be so much. After we did that, I started scheduling fun in my week. And I know that sounds a little less spontaneous, but I think if we don't schedule it, we don't do it.
Mhm.
So Wednesday nights, I typically will either have coffee with a new friend or, go to a new coffee shop or do a new activity. And Sunday afternoons, I schedule creative time for myself because I just realized over these years that was something that I loved as a kid and I quit doing as an adult. So I'll take a pottery course, or I'll sew, or I'll paint, or I'll whatever. But that we have to stop thinking, okay, I'm really busy right now. When things settle down, we'll schedule fun. Or I'll go out with Sally, maybe in a few months when I have more energy, or, whatever. We have got all these excuses. But when we do these fun things, it energizes us.
Mhm.
It really, really does. And it can make getting through the hard times a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about, as adults, like you said, all that stuff gets squashed out of us. When we're kids, we like run out the front door. Who knows what's going to happen? Oh, there's my friend down the street. Run down the street, go play with them. And we don't do that. And I tell people all the time, always be curious.
Mhm.
Even if you're going the same way to work or going the same way to school or whatever it is, find 3 new things that on that same route that you may have not noticed because you're just like tunnel vision,
Mhm.
and be curious about it. And I mean, I've always been curious. That's why I've done so many crazy things in my life. But when things bubble up like, "Oh, somebody gives me a introductory flight lesson. That's really cool. Okay, now I'm gonna go get my private pilot's license." Then I buy a plane. Then so I go a little deep on some of that stuff. Um, but seriously, I think that, you're absolutely right. We forget how to just have fun.
Mhm.
I used to have a place in Bisbee, Arizona. I live in the Seattle area, and I would drive down there. I would take 2 to 3 days because I would take my dogs with me, and it was great because I listened to podcasts, I got to see I would just pull off the side of the road and take pictures of some abandoned old gas station or just, see the things around me or take a different route. I ended up the first time I did it, I ended up in, sort of Death Valley. It's, Beatty, Nevada. And, I'm driving through this little kinda almost like a little ghost town, but there's people there and stuff, a little western town, and I'm looking at some of the cool old abandoned buildings, and I just love that visualization of that. And all of a sudden, I came upon a herd of donkeys, like, roaming the streets, just wild and stuff. So I'm an equestrian, I love horses, and I love all those creatures. I pulled the car over, and I got out. And I wandered over, and they were like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" They weren't tethered to anything, they were just roaming the streets. I interacted with them, they all kinda swarmed me because they were looking for treats, of course, and I think I may have scrounged up a couple of carrot sticks or something in the car, but it was the most fun. It was just and so then every time after that, I would go that same way and drive around until I found the donkeys, and it was hysterical, and I have pictures
Mhm.
of myself just like they're surrounding me, and they're so cute. But yeah, that's what happens when we open our eyes, get out of our
Mhm.
cell phones and
Yeah,
just do some exploration and let whatever's gonna happen, and not try and control it. You might run
absolutely.
into a herd of wild donkeys.
I love that. Now I wanna go see the donkeys.
Oh my god, they're probably still there. I don't know who they belong to, but I'm sure they didn't look, they clearly weren't wild, but they just roam and they were in the town. They weren't, like, out in a field somewhere. They were just roaming around. I was like, "This is
That's awesome.
hysterical." I know, I loved it. I just loved them so much. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So, where are you right now in your life? And I think before we got on, we were talking a little bit about, you're sort of in a transformational phase. Tell me where you are headed.
Well, that's anybody's guess at this point in time, but, I really feel I'm in this beautiful space of curiosity, I think, is really what it is, and the great thing about where I am in my life is I don't have to make anything happen. I'm pretty much one foot out the door, ready to close my oncology career. I'm safe to retire anytime financially. So this just feels like a really awesome adventure. I'm speaking more to audiences, working more as a coach with folks who are going through difficult things, and just enjoying the process and making decisions that just feel comfortable for me. And what a great place that is. Yeah.
Yeah, I li things what you said, I'm making decisions about things that feel comfortable to me.
Mhm.
How long did it take you to get to that point of being okay with making decisions that feel comfortable for you?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I can pinpoint that. That's a tough one. I think part of it, honestly, is being in midlife.
Mhm.
I think this season of life for me has been very empowering. I see a lot of women who focus on the change or the loss that midlife brings, whether it's, you know, maybe health problems or maybe our vanity, our more wrinkles and a little bit more sag here and there. Our children are moving out of the house and just there is a ton of change that happens in midlife. Absolutely. But when I really turned that around and thought, huh, I am not really stuck to the house anymore. I'm very fortunate in my oncology career because I'm only there 1 day a week, very casual. Um, if something comes up, I have the opportunity to be curious and to be adventurous. But I would say losing my daughter was definitely a starting point for, recognizing life is freaking short. I
Mhm.
don't know if I'll be here next year. I don't know if I'll be here next month or tomorrow.
Yeah,
So, if something comes up and it feels really good in my gut, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And just living for today really are the biggest things. And I love adventure. I'm really loving adventure the older I get. And I want to experience everything that life has to offer.
that is beautiful. That is beautiful. And, as we're wrapping up here, I know you said, I mean, for you, like you said, the pivotal point was losing your daughter. What if and I know people struggle with moving forward and being adventurous and being curious without those big traumatic changes in life.
Mhm.
What can you tell people about and you said it very beautifully there, but I mean, even if somebody hasn't had those big changes, how can they start to, be curious and stuff? And we've talked about it a little bit, but I was like, can you kind of bring it home and what advice would you give someone who is in a place of I need to change. I don't have joy in my life. I don't feel curious anymore
Mhm.
for whatever reason.
Right. Well, and stuck in the muck, right? I think
Stuck in the muck.
we're all there at some point. In my book I talk about having a compass and pointing that compass to where you want to be. Because I don't think we can have any movement in life without knowing where we want to go. And then I think once we have a destination or even a vague direction, then we can start taking those baby steps. Every decision, every action that you take, you can ask yourself, is this moving me closer to that dream or further away? You think of a marathon runner, maybe the first, you want to run a 10K. You want to maybe save up for that holiday, whatever it might be. What's a 1% shift that you can do today? Well, maybe I can start saving $10 a week, whatever it is that's doable for you. If you want to run that marathon, go sign up for a Learn to Run course. And just every day, what's one thing I can do to move myself closer? But finding joy specifically, I think you got to make that choice. Think of your friend group. Who is really fun to be around? Who could you spend more time with? What brings you joy? What things brought you joy as a child? Like you say, riding bikes outside until the streetlights came on. Well, you can still do that.
Yeah.
You can still do that. Are there things on your list that you think, oh, I've always wanted to do that thing? For me, it was pottery. I still have to go to ballroom dancing. That's still on my list. But start making a list of things that bring you joy or might bring you joy. Be curious. They might not, but you won't know unless you try. So I
Yeah.
think what you said earlier, Sue, about being curious is so important and setting your compass towards that direction. And as long as you're always aware of that compass, you will make the right shifts.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love it. It's like getting in your car and saying, "Okay, we're going to go east for the day.
For the day.
Well, let's see where we end up."
That's right. That's
I
right.
I love that. Make sure you have a full tank of gas. That was the other thing I discovered driving through nowhere, Nevada. Oh, that was the last gas station for like 60 miles. Oh my god. That was another not joyous moment, but it was
Life
joyous when
lessons.
I finally came upon the gas station that was not a mirage.
Uh,
Anyway,
that's awesome.
Lisa, this has been an amazing conversation. If people want to reach out to you, what is the best way to connect with you?
Well, since I'm in this transition place and it seems like my website's being rebuilt and everything else, I'm just going to say send me an email. I would love
Wow,
to hear
that's
from
old
you.
school. I love it.
It is kind of old school, but you know what?
Yeah,
If people want to reach out, and my email is Lisa at Lisa K Boehm, BOEHM.com.
perfect. And is your website still up? Also, you have your book. I'm gonna put a link to your books
Yeah.
on Amazon and all of that, and your website is still up even in the event that in case somebody's shy and they just wanna
Yeah.
yeah. But I love that. Thank you for sharing your email address. I think that, if this conversation has resonated with, someone, and I know it has probably resonated with a number of people, I love that you're giving them that personal connection to be able to reach out to you.
Absolutely.
Do you have any final words that you'd like to share, or have you
I'd
that's it?
say just be curious.
Yeah, love
Just
that.
be curious and find some more joy.
Yes. Beautiful. I love this. Thank you so much for being on the show, Lisa, and for those of you out there, if something about this episode or all of it has resonated with you, reach out to Lisa. And also, please rate and review this episode, rate and review the show. I love bringing you guests like Lisa. And until next week, be a badass. This is Sue with Midlife Strategies for Badass Women, and I will see you next time.